Hello, and welcome to The Third Space, the podcast for those who see the beauty of Catholicism as well as the ugliness, who've experienced real harm and real grace in the Church. I'm your host, Paul Fahey, a mental health counselor and catechist. In every episode, I will have conversations with guests about the good and the bad in the Church, avoiding easy answers or black and white fundamentalism in order to hold on to all that is true. Today, I'm talking with Jenn Morson about the ways that we have felt betrayed by the pro-life movement through the past several years, but most especially in January of 2026. I postponed my normal Monday release, so today I could publish this conversation, which was recorded last night, Monday, January 26th. Jenn Morson is a freelance writer and investigative journalist. She has written for the New York Times, the Washington Post, Time, U.S. Catholic, and more. Her reporting has focused on the clergy abuse crisis, specifically on issues present at her alma mater, the Franciscan University of Steubenville. Jenn, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I've been wanting to have you on for a while now. You've been in the list on my phone of people I wanted to invite, specifically because of the work you've done as a journalist, investigating the clerical abuse crisis, specifically some of the stories coming out of the Franciscan University of Steubenville over the last several years. But then just a few days ago, you wrote an article on your Substack titled "His Name is Liam," and in it you juxtaposed the March for Life going on in Washington, D.C., which was happening at that time, with some of the horrific violence being perpetrated by ICE in Minnesota. It felt incredibly relevant to me. It really felt personal to me, what you had written. And I reached out to you to see if we could talk about both of our experiences in the pro-life movement, how that shaped us, and then like where we're at now, looking at a pro-life movement that seems to have betrayed the values that at least it used to have, or at least said it had. And then a couple days after your article was published, Alex Preddy was gunned down in the street in Minneapolis, and just felt all the more relevant. But before we jump into discussing your article, if you don't mind, I'd love to hear some of your own story. I don't suspect you, as a kid, you saw yourself becoming an investigative journalist working on stories of the clerical sex abuse crisis. So I'm curious about your story, your relationship with Catholicism, and how you ended up in this work.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I guess my experience, I obviously certainly never thought that this would be where I would land. And in fact, I can remember very clearly, I live outside of Washington, D.C. I can remember very clearly driving by the Basilica of the National Shrine of the Immaculate Conception and seeing a group of protesters. I was in college, so it must have been, I'm going to age myself here, but, in the late 90s. And they were protesting at the Basilica, and they held signs. Looking back, they probably were members of SNAP, the Survivors Network of those abused by priests. And they, were holding these placards and talking about clergy abuse. And I can remember thinking, oh, well, that's not that I didn't believe that it happened, but more so just it was some sort of very rare, and that these people maybe were misguided in their anger, that it was an individuals that they, should be angry at. This, of course, was before Spotlight in Boston, and also to be fair to myself, before I became an adult, and kind of realized the breadth of the crisis, and more so than the abuse, but even the cover up, moving priests around, and the clericalism that kind of perpetuated the issues. So I guess that was kind of initially, and I say I kind of like fell into writing about clergy abuse when, before the first piece that I ever did, which, like you mentioned, was about Franciscan University. Before that happened, I actually tried for about a year to find a different journalist who to cover the piece when somebody came to me with what had happened to them, because I didn't feel like I was, at a point in my career where I could do the story justice. And after about a year, I couldn't find anybody who would take it. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm writing this. And then I also felt somewhat ill prepared. I didn't have that sensitivity, I felt, to be able to handle that story, but I did the best I could at the time. And yeah, I mean, as so often happens, when I told the first story, then people came forward and shared more stories, and kind of went from there. So, yeah.
Yeah. When you had written that story, or when that story essentially you fell in your lap in various ways, what was your relationship with Catholicism at that time? And was it, yeah, and what has been your relationship with Catholicism through your life?
So I think, I mean, if we had a relationship status, it would be it's complicated, which I don't think is necessarily untrue for most people in this day and age. You know, I was, I attending church. My children received the sacraments. I did marry a non-Catholic, which is a little bit different, just kind of a little bit different. But my parents are practicing Catholics. My whole family is practicing Catholics. But it's been a struggle, and in various times, maybe more so than others. Um, yeah, I think it's been very difficult, and I know that you've probably experienced some similar struggles as well, just with the like stranglehold that um, political issues and political conservatism seem to have on the American church. I don't think this is necessarily the case in other countries. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see that it is. It seems to be a bit of an American phenomena, um, and even just this very strange influencer culture. Um, I went to a meeting the other week for my fifth child is having her first communion, and there was a parent meeting. And so I went with my little notebook, and I thought we were going to talk about, just the logistics of it all. And when we sat down, they were like, okay, we're going to watch this video. And it was like, it was like this 25-minute video, and content wise, it was fine ish. I mean, there wasn't anything like objectionable, but all of the people in the video, I unfortunately have the displeasure of knowing their, loud spoken opinions on other things. And it just made it really difficult. Um, there's My brother was also there, because he has his daughter as well, and he was texting me. It's like, yeah, because he could see it on my face, and I was trying to be polite because this woman is very nice, and she had no idea. But some of the priests featured, some of the theologians featured, and I'm just in my head like, oh yeah, that one, knew about so and so and didn't do anything. Oh, that one just promoted Chad Ripperger, and it's like all these things, and it just I mean, part of it I feel like is just the internet and our ability to have those connections. I doubt very much that my parents' generation had any struggles faith wise, because, their priest was a right wing spokesperson or something. I mean, really, at that time, people were just trying to make it, through the day, that kind of thing. So, yeah, it's made it very difficult. Um, I don't know, for better or for worse for me, and kind of having that behind the curtain, knowing how the sausage is made viewpoint has been really really a struggle faith wise, for sure.
Yeah. 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 What comes to mind is a handful of years ago, I got coffee with an old professor of mine back in undergrad
Mm.
when I was studying theology, and back shortly after I graduated undergrad was when I got my first like ministry job, and he had said something to me about like don't let the church take away your faith.
Mm.
Um, and at that time I was really young, I was really naive. I was like, okay, maybe he's just kind of old and cranky. And then 10, 15 years later, I had just left my job under really terrible circumstances at the parish and this huge falling out and betrayal. And I got coffee with him, and he hasn't seen me in years. And the first thing out of his mouth was, "So has the church made you an atheist yet?"
Mm.
Um, and he laughed, and I laughed, and I was like, "Okay, we're gonna have a real conversation here." But but there's something really true there of like once you see behind the curtain, there's a lot that feels like pretending, and a lot that feels like um, a lot of hypocrisy.
Yeah, and I know that it doesn't make me unique or special to have that experience, to have that feeling. And I know that other people maybe handle it better. I know people personally who do a better job of kind of, you know, distinguishing between the faith and the people. Um, but yeah, I mean, I personally have had a really hard time with it. So, um, yeah, I guess that's where I am, still kind of in that in between, not really knowing, not really kind of having, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Um, to shift to talk about your article,
sure.
um, the full title that you gave it is uh, his name is Liam. I can't believe I'm watching people defend this, but I'm watching people who are thrilled by this. Um, wh- what's your article about, and why did you choose to write it when you wrote it?
Sure. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time. And I think I even say this in the piece. I know I did at some point. I'm like 99% sure. But that I haven't really talked about a lot of this publicly. I mean, I do talk about a lot of things publicly, obviously, between, articles I've written, but also on my Substack. But well, 3 years ago now, for example, my first job out of college, I was Frank Pavone, no longer father, was at the time father, Frank Pavone's, I guess you'd say executive assistant. That was my first grown up job. Was working for a pro life organization. I had spent my youth, I mean, I'd gone to the March for Life many, many times. I was active in my campus's pro life group. Um, I had even taken part in what was known as like rescues, meaning like vernacular being people who were arrested, civil disobedience many times. First as a teenager, and then a young adult. So it was kind of a big part of my upbringing, and certainly it was all inextricably linked to the church. Um, so I struggle a lot thinking about, well, is this something that I should talk about? Not wanting to like trash talk anybody, but at the same time, in the kind of years now that we're on like year 10 of the scourge that is Donald Trump on our country, um, and I guess just his being as like a figurehead, really, I've just watched people that I knew to be good, to be generous, to be giving, you know, not just of their excess, but literally, caring for the poor, caring um, for the disadvantaged. And I've watched literally the exact same people. I don't mean that figuratively. I mean people as individuals. Um, just I don't know what happened, obviously, but just kind of morph into people that delight in cruelty. Um, and I don't. It's been really hard to watch that. And I guess really it did start most significantly with Frank Pavone. And I'd always defended him, even though when I left, the reason that I left working for him was because I was asked to promote somebody that I did not think was acting morally. This was around 2000, and they had obtained I think it was the beginning of digital cameras, and they'd obtained high res video images of women undergoing abortions. They'd paid cameramen in developing countries, some of which were countries where women would have been executed if they'd been found to be pregnant or had an abortion. It didn't matter if they had been assaulted. And I felt very strongly that this was not moral, it wasn't ethical. I expressed that. I met with the person who had spearheaded this project, and he told me that these women should have thought better of it if they wanted to be treated with dignity, then they shouldn't have killed their babies. So I left. And then I didn't say anything about it at the time to anybody outside of a very close circle of friends. And as time went on, I continued to defend Frank Pavone, and the other people there who, even though I felt very strongly were acting unethically, I felt also that they believed very strongly in what they were doing, and that they had maybe been blinded by that kind of desperation, the sense of urgency. But then about 3 years ago, there was a piece that came out about a woman, and she had said that she was groomed by Frank Pavone when she worked there. And as I read that piece, I recognized details that nobody else would have recognized other than somebody who had worked there. And I knew who it was, basically, is what I'm saying. And I realized as I read her story that I saw myself, not to that extent, but I saw that some of the same things had happened to me, which I felt really stupid. At that point in time, I'd written extensively about clergy abuse, about grooming behaviors, about young women who'd been in the same position, and never once had it occurred to me that it had happened to me. So to see him go all in on Donald Trump, to the point that he literally gave up his priesthood for Donald Trump. That's what did it. Not because the Pope was being partisan, but because he was willing to do and say horrific things for Donald Trump over the church. So, I guess that kind of was the start of it. So, I didn't really associate with the pro-life movement, any further after I had left, about a year after I had left that. And as I was doing other things, I got married, I had a family, but during the first administration, I did a lot of volunteering with immigration advocacy group, and the absolute just derision that was sent my way for doing that it was, I still don't understand, to the point where literally helping pregnant women. But as it turns out, some of the things that critics would say about the pro-life movement, or people in the pro-life movement, that I always dismissed as being like just not true, were kind of, it was evident that there might be some truth to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm like really just bloviating. I apologize.
No, no.
Okay.
It brings to mind a passage from your article that I wanted to read. Um, in that piece, you said, the people headed to D.C. believe they are pro-life, and that this extends from womb to tomb. They claim to believe that it's not merely about abortion, it's about protecting life at all stages. I haven't spoken much about my life in that world publicly. I don't like to cast some very good and yet misguided people in a bad light. If I'm being honest, I also admit that I find it difficult to reflect my own misguided efforts sometimes. I try to be gentle with my younger self and vow to do better instead. And some days are better than others on that front. But what I haven't talked about publicly is what it has felt like to watch some of the kindest, smartest, most compassionate people I've ever known seemingly transform into cruel and power-hungry monsters. That passage was one of a few that really struck me. So I grew up in the pro-life movement, and it would have been, half a generation maybe after you. I graduated high school in 2008, and I went to the March for Life in high school, so the early
Mm-hmm.
2000s. Um, I was a part of a pro-life homeschool group growing up. My parents were really active in a local pregnancy resource center. Um, and in college, I ran the pro-life group. I organized trips to the March for Life. I got a priest, I forget his name. It wasn't Frank, but it was another priest from Priests for Life to come and speak on campus. Um, it shaped so much of not just like my politics, but also my faith and also
Mm-hmm.
my vision of the world. Um, in some ways, really, really positively. Like this value of every life having infinite dignity, regardless of circumstances. That's what was taught to me, and I actually believed people when they told me that, and I still believe that really, really profoundly. But then I noticed something, and it's something you noticed too from what you're saying, and that is like that's a really hard belief. Like the belief that every single
Mm.
human person has infinite dignity, like that's a really difficult belief to have, right? Like even at this moment right now where I'm sitting, that means that I have to believe that the ICE officers in Minnesota who beat and shot, like I have to believe that they have dignity too.
Right. Yeah.
That's really hard to do,
Yeah.
but I'm trying. I may not always get it right, but it's something that I actively try and do. But it seemed like what what I came to see within the pro-life movement was the ends seemed to justify the means, and that
Mm-hmm.
some lives could be sacrificed for a perceived greater good. And the greater good used to be, well, we have to reverse Roe versus Wade or something like that, a political end, like a policy end. But then at some point, as a young adult after college, I think it struck me that the end was we have to own the libs. We have to defeat the libs. That maybe even for some people that was more important than even anti-abortion policy changes. Um, but not everyone, right? Like, it's a really confusing mix of not everyone. And I did see people who like would give the shirts off their back to someone and who volunteered the precious, genuinely precious time and resources they had to to vulnerable women coming to pregnancy resource centers. Um, it's really murky. It's really hard to navigate.
Yeah, no, I totally understand what you're saying. I mean, I owe in great part my excellent education on eugenics. I learned about. I mean, honestly, I learned about how the Nazis learned from us. I would not have known that otherwise. Historical facts of what happened in the U.S. between Jim Crow laws and just even our treatment of people with mental illness, and all of those things. But then to have, yeah, like what you're saying, but to watch the same people, oh, you know, make fun of Renee Good, um, literally a mother. Not that that makes her life any more or less valuable, because it doesn't. But when you're people who are saying that you're pro motherhood and, value and cherish motherhood, to just have them sneering and oh, well, look, she was a lesbian, or she had, you know, I don't know, colored hair, these sorts of things. Whatever it was to make it okay that she was gunned down. um yeah, it is, it's hard to understand. And I haven't actually read it carefully, but I guess there was this recent op-ed in the Washington Examiner, which is a fairly conservative, more than fairly, it's a very conservative publication. The author is a man named Peter Laffin, and it was about how anti-life the Trump administration is. But it wasn't even like from a whole life approach. It was like literally strictly just based on like abortion issues. I mean, but even that doesn't seem, I don't know. I don't, I will say my own experience was when I was a young adult and it was talking about voting, it would have been unthinkable to vote for somebody who was not Republican, because Republicans were pro-life. So I saw a lot of, and myself too, I didn't really think of anything else. Like, what else was there to think about? That was it. That was all you had to think about. So I don't know if it was a situation where people were like, well, if they're right about this, then they must be right about these other things. Um, and I don't know at what point that just kind of numbed the rest of their morality. I don't know, because yeah, you know, just talking about immigrants, the people literally named by Jesus as the people that we're supposed to take care of, but somehow being able to kind of pretzel into this worldview that excludes the dignity of a very large group of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as, yeah, when I think it was during the first election, it was Susan B. Anthony List. So that's just one organization, fundraised $52 million to elect Donald Trump. And that was just one. That was just one organization. Um, and I just thought, yeah, no, this is it. That's that.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean,
you, yeah.
I see yesterday on Twitter, Kristen Hawkins, who's the head of Students for Life, and I did stuff with Students for Life when I
Oh yeah.
ran the
No.
Students
Yeah.
for Life group, and she's defending ICE and blaming Alex for getting himself shot.
Yeah, and I this isn't an original thought. I don't remember who. I don't know who to attribute it and give credit to, but I was reading today someone just saying what's fascinating is that they're furious at him for doing everything that they said that that the religious right, or pro-lifers, or just Christians in general, that being a man protecting a woman, that he put himself, he acted as a protector to a woman. She was pepper sprayed, which is how he ended up in the line of fire, by doing that. And I don't know if it's conscious. I don't know if it's I don't know if they'd ever consider it, but it just feels like that kind of envy, almost, because of the fact that I do believe that they know they're wrong. Um, Even as far suppressed as that might be. I mean, I know that Kristen Hawkins knows that it was wrong when she stood there and laughed while Father Calvin Robinson threw a Nazi salute. I know she knows it's wrong. I know she knows that this is wrong. I know that she must at some point in time have the self-awareness to see her own children, and or else it's that, or she doesn't actually believe what she's talking about. And to be fair, these are both viable options. I do think that there are people who have adopted a language of, you know being pro-life, or, I mean, it's not all on him, but Donald Trump does it very well. He can say the words, somebody puts in front of him. And I think that there's probably a good number of people like that as well, who have decided that there is something profitable, at this point in history, of being this terrible, while at the same time, being against abortion, let's say. And it's also an easy thing to do because they already overturned Roe versus Wade. So now you can just be like, yeah, anyway, and do whatever else. Um, and I don't know how we come back from that. And I do want to say that there are people like, Destiny, Herndon de la Rosa. I don't know if you're
Yep.
familiar with her.
Oh, yes.
So, I mean, God bless Destiny, because I would not. She is the patience of a saint, and she is, she truly puts her money where her mouth is, walks the walk, and she is, running two centers, shelters, one on either side of the border, helping literally pregnant women and their babies. And these pro-lifers are hopping in her mentions just to let her know what a shitty person she is, for doing actual, genuine pro-life work. So, I mean, I admire people like that. I'm not that good of a person. I'm not that big of a person. I'd like to be, to stay in there and try to change hearts and minds. I know, like Elizabeth Hansen is another person. Um, but at the same time, I struggle with, and maybe it's just because I'm just too old, I've been around too long, but the same people. I was thinking about this the other day when George Bush ran for president the first time. American Life League was this pro-life organization. I don't even know I think it still exists. I don't know, but it was run by Judy Brown, and they were like, you cannot vote for George Bush. He's for, exceptions, like the rape
Yep.
and incest and life of the mother. Would not say it was okay. In fact, told people not to vote for him. They are super into Donald Trump, and I just am like, but what? Like, and that's strictly on life issues. Like, I'm not touching all the rest of it. I don't understand it. Um, Sometimes I wonder if I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Kind of what I was saying before about the power and the winning. I do think that there is an element of that. I do think that a lot of people were, enamored by and have enjoyed being, um, on the inside. I know a lot of people who go and attend those, like, Trump. I don't know if they still happen, but they were in the Trump Hotel during his first administration, and going to the White House Christmas party. And I guess I don't know for what, you
Yeah.
know.
The allure of the halls of power.
Yes, yeah, yes. And I get it. It's not fun to be not liked. I mean, who like sets out to be like, it would be really awesome as people just called me names for my whole life or whatever. I get that. I
But
do.
the
Yeah.
but but the like literal gospel is blessed are those who persecute you in my name.
Right. And not only that, like even just the, you know, greater love hath no man laid on his life for his friends. And that is like when I look at the American Catholic voices, um, you've got your Matt Walsh, you've got, Caroline Levitt, all of these people, and their line is, I mean, not to be crass, but it's more like F these people, shoot first. Um, you know, uh, we're so much winning, we're gonna drive out the invaders. And I mean, uh,
Yeah.
yeah.
There there was a part in your article, another part I wanted to highlight because it stood in like really strong juxtaposition to an experience I had several years ago. Um so the article is about the young boy named Liam who was taken into custody by ICE, one with the Spider-Man backpack. Everyone saw his picture last week.
Hmm.
You said this. You said many of the same people boarding these coach buses headed to DC woke up this morning, as most of us did, to the picture of wee Liam. And when they saw his image, the sweet baby boy with his Spider-Man backpack and bunny hat, they didn't see their own children's faces reflected back, as I did. They saw an invader, an alien, a criminal, a non-person. They added laugh reacts to news stories about him. They wrote FAFO underneath the image of his scared little face. Some suggested that Liam should be taken and raised by an American couple, since his own parents were negligent in their minds. They scolded their friends for believing liberal lies, for falling for fake news, for being manipulated. Their deeply held opinions were shaped and reshaped like clay as the day progressed, and while DHS issued lie after lie about Liam and his father. About 10 years ago, it was 2015, it was the World Meeting of Families in Philadelphia. It was when Pope Francis visited the United States. There was a week-long conference, the World Meeting of Families conference, and the week previous to the big public mass with the Pope, and the focus was on mercy in the family because it was also the year of mercy that Pope Francis had started. And one of the speakers was Helen Alvare, um, and she was talking about how through experiencing love and mercy in family, our hearts are trained to see everyone else as family. She talked about some of her own experiences as a professor with college students, how um, through having children, she was able to recognize college students who would come to her with different crises going on, that this is someone else's child. So someone
Mm-hmm.
loves this individual the way I love my own children, right? Okay. And it was through like the practice of the family that opened her heart to loving others. That was the vision she proposed, and that her talk was overwhelming to me because about 3 weeks before was when it was the end of the summer in 2015 when the Syrian refugee crisis really made international news. And it made international news because there was a picture of a young boy named Alan Kurdi. And again, everyone saw this picture. This was the picture of, he was around 3 years old, toddler, lying on the beach off the Aegean Sea. And I'd seen his picture. I've shared this story before. I saw his picture at work. It's on social media or something. And his picture came up, and I read the story. And him and another sibling and his dad, and maybe other family members, I'm not sure, were crammed in this life raft, this dinghy, fleeing for survival. And a storm came up, and Aelin was literally ripped from his dad's arms and drowned in the sea. And I looked at this picture, and he has his legs, like his knees, like tucked up underneath him, and his head tilted on the side. And it was exactly as my oldest, the toddler at the time, would sleep. And I sat at my desk and just like cried that whole afternoon. And then the speaker at this conference like put words to that experience.
Mm-hmm.
His dad loved him the way I love my son. And like that like changed something profoundly in me in being able to see refugees and immigrants differently, more real. That's what ought to have happened. Like, that's what I hear you describing. This picture, everyone who's ever had a 5-year-old should have looked at this picture and thought, how terrified this child must be. But there was a hardness of heart that prevented that from happening. Which is frightening. Like, it's honestly terrifying.
No, it really is, because it's exactly what you're describing, because I don't know why or what or how, but at some point there has been some change to where some people were bringing up Elian Gonzalez, who was a little boy. There was a custody battle. It was in the 90s. There's pictures of these soldiers with machine guns, and they're taking him, because it was an international custody battle. There was not a person in this country who didn't see that picture and feel empathy and just anger. And if they thought, well, good, then they kept it to themselves, because it would not have been tolerated. It had nothing to do with Democrat, Republican, whatever, whoever you had voted for, whatever. Obviously, it was Bill Clinton was president at the time. And like you're saying with that picture, of that sweet boy on the beach, and even 10 years ago, I feel like, for the most part, people would not have said anything other than, what a tragedy, to see him. And I don't know why or how, or if it's just, I don't know, somebody was kind of read what I'd written and was like, no, people just, that's how people are. And they just they weren't showing you their true selves when they were being good. And I'm like, but it's not. Like something has changed. Something has definitely changed to where people saw him and, I don't know, talk themselves out of seeing him as a person.
Yeah. There was, last week being Martin Luther King Day, I reread his letter from a Birmingham jail, which is a letter to, a response letter to a group of clergy who had written this kind of mealy-mouthed, like, like, don't be causing so much problems in your fight for racial justice type of statement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And towards the end of that letter, Martin Luther King appeals to their conscience, and he appeals to their conscience by saying, maybe you'd be saying something different if you were here and you saw the police beating young men, the police sicking their dogs on children, the police doing these brutal... Maybe if you saw these things happening, you'd be saying something different. And I read that last week, and I'm like... Well, specifically, Bishop Barron came to mind, but not just Bishop Barron. We are watching that. Everyone is watching that. and yet our consciences still aren't moved. The way that you just described it is like someone has to almost actively talk themselves out of seeing the humanity when it's just laid stark bare like that. And that really is frightening. Like, um, man, and not to be too dramatic. So there's Pope Benedict wrote an encyclical on hope, Spe Salve, and in it he talked about the type of person who chooses hell. Now, I'm a very hopeful universalist, so that's the perspective in which I'm saying this. Pope Benedict talks about the kind of person who's judged at the end of their life by Christ. And the person who chooses hell, he says, is the person who has chosen ugliness over beauty, has chosen deceit over truth, and who prefers evil over goodness, prefers lies over the truth. Like, that's almost what this seems like. Like, it feels, oh man, not to draw, and you and Franciscan, I've been around the block in charismatic groups.
Yeah.
It feels evil. It feels like an evil, almost, yeah, it feels like an evil beyond. Yeah.
No, I agree. It does. It is, and it sometimes feels very overwhelming because it almost also feels like people are under some sort of like spell, or you're kind of, I don't know, like I can remember as a kid having like a dream, like one of those recurring nightmare kind of things where you're trying to like warn somebody or tell somebody and they are just not believing you or not seeing what you're seeing. And it kind of feels very similarly as if something has just taken hold of people, to make them like be under this kind, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's just giving people some sort of, I don't know, giving people too much credit or forgiveness. Because I do think there's something in what, Benedict was saying, that people are choosing this kind of, base nature or inclination, or for whatever reason, to indulge that. And it's hard to reconcile, kind of with who or even people who've been kind to you, or wonderful or generous, or at various points in time, and then to see them kind of react this way. There was a pastor, oh my gosh, I mean, he was commenting on a mutual friend's Facebook page, and I recognized his name because it was a name of like somebody that I like super admired when I was younger. It's this black pastor, and he always spoke of the kind of the correlation between the civil rights movement, and he had, you know, I think he had, I knew like generationally, he was like a young man during the civil rights movement, like a teenager, but he did have some kind of crossover with, Dr. Martin Luther King, and he would speak of that. And then he's leaving this comment about how great ICE is and how they're, staving off this southern border invasion. And I don't know if he ever replied to me, but I said, I just have to let you know, Reverend, that as somebody who admired you, and, this just makes me sad. Like, I don't really have anything to say. I'm not going to argue with you. You're, 70-year-old man. Like, but it just makes me really sad, to see you talk that way about people, about other human beings. So I don't, this isn't a terribly uplifting conversation, I realize, but at the same time, I do not know how we right the ship.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an uplifting conversation, but I think there's something. Yesterday, maybe, a priest I know on Twitter, he posted something about how, just how morally reprehensible this is, and how sad, and how sad the killing of Alex Preddy is.
Yeah.
And he just got like dogpiled. And I know this priest, and I commented, and um, I talked about how like this feels unreal, and then the shock and betrayal is like is compounded even more when it's Christians who are defending state violence, and just how lonely and isolating that feels as a Catholic, as
Mm-hmm.
someone who uh, believes in the dignity of every person. Um, and there's something to, and something I wanted from this conversation was just holding space for those who feel that same loneliness and isolation, and honestly, profound betrayal.
Mm.
Um, in watching what seems like 10 plus years of betrayal, but just like the next iteration that feels worse and worse and worse somehow,
Mm.
when you're like, at at what point are people going to wake up and come out of this malaise uh, and stand up for the principles that they taught me in the first place? Um, it's not a comfortable space.
Yeah, I will say there was this Protestant pastor. His name is Rob Schenck, and it's funny. He is a Protestant pastor. His twin brother is a Catholic priest, um, and their father was Jewish. So it's like a whole walked into a bar situation there. But they were very prominent in the pro life movement and very politically active, to the point that Rob has had, or Reverend Shank, I should say, the man's old enough to be my dad, um, you know, like a profound like reconversion, I guess, if you will. He's still a pastor, but Mother Jones weirdly profiled him this morning. It was hilarious because before I knew it was him, because it was like he had like a fur collar around his face because he's in Minnesota, and he had grown a mustache, presumably to keep warm. And I was like, oh, I should send this to Rob. It's another pastor, like, and I was like, oh wait, it's him. Um, just kind of did like a video snippet about just basically that he's almost like making reparations for his own part in where we are now. And God bless him, because again, he's a better person than I am, because he has such patience. People will just call him terrible. I don't know what happened to you, you know, you're brainwashed, and say all these sorts of things, and he'll say like, thank you, brother, for commenting, and like, try and engage with them, and you know, not try to like convince them, but kind of just, have a conversation. Because he feels kind of responsible for laying some of the groundwork of where we are today. So there is some hope, I feel like, in that. And I do kind of cling to that, and to those people who still are managing to be actively and upfront, representative of the faith, and not be horrible. So I'm just thinking of some other people too, like Dawn, Eden Goldstein, you know, just had some really beautiful things to say about Alex Preddy. Found out that he was awarded the Boy Scouts Light of Christ Award as a young man. Um, just really, I think, I don't know, trying to like remind myself of those things, because it is hard when you see so many people that, I mean, honestly, that are, from my perspective, clamoring for Barabbas. I mean, it's hard to watch. It's heartbreaking, and not just because, I don't know, not just because of what they're saying or believing, but just feeling that kind of hatred, you know, it's visceral.
Yeah. I think there's hope too in how do I want to word this? I don't think this is a partisan thing. I mean, I profoundly
Right.
don't believe that at all. I, um, in in the counseling world, I'm the super conservative.
Right. Yeah.
In the small town where I lived, for the past 10 years, I'm the super liberal, right? And I mean, there's partisanship in this. It's
Mm,
always easier to defend your own team and to attack
of course.
the other
Yeah.
team. But even like today, I saw, and I'm forgetting his name. It was the attorney who defended the officer who shot Renee Good. He was running for political office,
Oh, yeah. He was the Republican candidate for governor of Minnesota.
and he just resigned
Mm-hmm.
because
He
of
did.
because of Alex's death this weekend,
Yeah.
and not wanting to be associated with the Republican Party. I listen to most of my are people who are deeply conservative, who are absolutely disgusted by this.
Mm,
Um, and to me, like, there's hope in that too. There's hope that people can
mm-hmm.
see beyond how do I like win the next election, or how do I um, beat whoever I believe the most terrible candidate is right now, or how do I get into the halls of power and see beyond the short term. They seem few and far between right now, but I also like really want like there's a part of me. Oh man, I feel like I'm rambling now. There was you mentioned Liz Hansen.
Mm-hmm.
She's a good friend. She shared a homily with me that a bishop from New York gave at the March for Life just a few days ago, and
Yeah.
um, in that he quoted Vatican II talking about all these evils against human dignity, abortion being one of them, but like deportation and unjust working conditions also being, grave evils that the church
Mm-hmm.
lists. And he's quoting this from Vatican II, and at the end of this paragraph from Vatican II, it says something like how terrible these evils are and how much harm it does to the people who support them.
Mm.
And when I heard that, it was like I felt genuine compassion, which had to have been grace, because that was not my own
Mm.
effort there. Of this is really bad for people, and
Yes.
anyone who is standing up to their own team right now and saying enough is enough. There's a real part of me that wants to like really embrace them, because it feels like that takes at this moment that takes real moral courage,
Mm.
which doesn't mean that they have all the right opinions about everything else
Sure.
or whatever. But but right now that feels like real courage.
Yeah, and I think it also is hard too because the longer that you kind of indulge that and feel that, then the more you've got to feel guilty for if you do kind of let yourself realize that. And I'm sure that's not doesn't feel great either. I mean, obviously literally no human is perfect, but it's hard to think about how we've harmed others. Um, it can be almost crushing at times. So yeah, that takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of guts to say, wow, like to kind of wake up to that, and also to have the guts to say to somebody on your team, like you said, or whatever, or the person sitting next to you, and be like, hey, actually, I'm not comfortable with this. Like at some point, somewhere we took a wrong turn because this isn't okay. Um, it's hard. It is hard too. Like I feel like what you're saying, it's good for you to have grace. But there was somebody yesterday. I don't remember where it was, but they just said something just one of these nasty comments about, basically like he deserved it or haha or whatever. And I genuinely, it was on Twitter. I honestly don't even know what happened. I don't really, I'm not very active there because people are terrible, but I truly meant it. I said, I honestly just feel so badly for you because whatever it is that is in you, whatever hatred is just festering that would make you feel not like catch that reaction. That's just, that must be really hard. And I'm sure that this person probably thought I was being sarcastic, but it wasn't at all. Like, I truly just, wow. Like, that's rough. Like, I can't even imagine. I don't know. I mean, think of the worst person and they passed away or something. Maybe I don't feel like bad, but I surely don't feel good. Like,
Yeah.
there's no joy in that at all. Um, yeah, I think I don't remember. I spouted off, of course, because sometimes I have a big mouth. Um, I think I said something kind of snarky about the silence of a lot of people, and a priest that I know on Twitter, but he's somewhat conservatively minded. He was like, "Well, if it makes you feel any better, I've seen like 8 priests say something." And then I think I have my settings as such. So I don't know. The next thing I saw was from him, and it was like, Jen is my friend. So all these horrible comments, and I was like, oh, I was like, I haven't seen any, but I'm not gonna go looking for them. But yeah, no, just to have, yeah, it's hard, and I know like people maybe rag on Bishop Barron a lot, but to be fair, like he wanted to be the internet bishop, so um, just the kind of bizarre both sides, maybe just round up these people reaction is just, whew, while
Yeah.
praising the president um, for his religious freedom efforts. It's,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Maybe this is like partly my own Catholic guilt here, but
Eh,
like the idea of duplicity
yeah.
is maybe like the most painful thing I can imagine. Of the idea of living a double life,
Mm,
of really facing that gap between who I want to be and how I'm actually acting and what I'm actually saying and believing
mm,
right now.
mm-hmm.
Um, like there's I have experienced that, and it is just a like incredibly painful and disorienting experience. And to make the choice, again, to go back to that line from Martin Luther King, his appeal to conscience. If only you saw these horrific acts, maybe you would change. Like, if I'm seeing those horrific acts and I'm not changing, the level of duplicity that I have to live with
Mm,
is also its own type of suffering.
yeah. No, that's true.
Which doesn't excuse anybody's actions, but
No.
maybe it helps me a little bit more compassionate. Maybe.
Mm, yeah.
Um, Jen, this was not a particularly uplifting conversation, but
No, it wasn't.
I really, I really appreciate uh, this space to process through some of this, and hopefully to give some space to others who are feeling that isolation and that same like disorientation. As they look at people who they love, people who are genuinely good and generous, saying and supporting things um, that are just so horrific. Yeah, maybe not consolation, maybe solace.
Yeah, I would say some comfort and also some hope that, like you're saying, that there is something that will, be that kind of watershed moment as well, you know?
Um, was there anything that we didn't talk about? do you would like to talk about?
Mm, I don't think so. I'm not really sure. I don't know. Do you do like a thing with links or like that sort of thing?
Absolutely. I'm going
Okay,
to
I
link
was gonna.
to I'm going to link to your article.
Oh,
Is
okay. I was gonna say link to Destiny's. I was just gonna say like if people wanted to like help support her work, I thought that would be cool.
Yes. And yeah, I'll encourage listeners if there are I mean, I've reached out to some people in Minneapolis who I know, asking
Mm.
them like where to donate to. Um
Yes. You know, who was it? Who somebody just posted? Maybe it was Chris Damian. Somebody posted like a whole like I will find it. It's I think on my Facebook and send it to you. But I think it was just like a whole list of links, like people who are buying groceries for people, so you could throw $20 their way or these sorts of things, big and small, which I think is helpful for people because sometimes you don't have time or means or whatever, but you can send somebody $10,
yeah.
um, and that really does help and make a difference. So
Yeah. Yeah, so if listeners if you know of places local in Minnesota, or if you know of pro-life organizations who are standing in the gap here, uh, please share their links in this, so people can see and um, support them as much as they can.
yeah. Awesome. Thanks so much, Paul. It was great talking to you.
Jenn, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for this conversation. And thank you for listening to the Third Space podcast. If you like this conversation, please subscribe. Episodes will be released every other week. And please share it with a friend and give it a rating and review on your favorite podcast app so that more people can discover the show. You can sign up for my newsletter or send me a message at catholicthirdSpace.com. And while you're there, please consider becoming a paid subscriber. All of your support directly helps my family and allows me to continue working on projects like this podcast. If you want to schedule individual coaching with me or have me out to consult or speak with your community, parish, diocese, or seminary, please visit livingsolidarity.com. And you can also join me at Smart Catholics, the online community for Catholics who want faithful conversations that go beyond easy answers or black and white fundamentalism. That's smartcatholics.com. Thanks for listening.